I never imagined that a random birthday party could completely shift the course of my life. That night, surrounded by dozens of strangers laughing under string lights in the backyard of a mansion on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, I was just looking for a beer and a quiet corner to escape the blaring music. But then I saw her, Rachel, standing under a bougainvillea trellis, squinting at the screen of an old phone she was holding above her head, trying to catch Wi-Fi like she was wrestling the signal from God himself. "Did you get it?" I asked before I could stop myself, half joking. She turned around and smiled. "No, but I'm guessing you're not from around here." "Why do you say that?" "Because you're standing in the only spot with good signal, and no one else ever stands there." We laughed, and just like that, all the noise around me disappeared. Rachel was the kind of woman who could make a chaotic room pause for a few seconds when she walked through. She had long blonde hair, eyes like a spring lake, and a way of speaking that felt both familiar and like stepping into a place you've never dared enter. We talked the whole evening, forgetting the time, forgetting everyone else. I was 27 at the time, having just moved to Utah to start a new job at a cybersecurity firm. The salary was decent, around $65,000 a year, enough to rent a one-bedroom apartment in Sandy, dine out a few times a month, and send money to help my mom fix up the old roof back in Idaho. Rachel was a whole different world. She was finishing her master's in education at the University of Utah, but what really got me was learning her father owned a chain of 11 luxury car showrooms, stretching from Las Vegas to Boise. Her mother ran a high-end home decor shop in downtown Salt Lake. It wasn't movie-style billionaire wealth, but the kind that made life feel effortlessly smooth. The kind that made me suddenly aware of how scuffed my leather shoes looked. Still, those early days together were golden. We dated in cafes around Sugar House, hiked the national parks, shared late nights eating instant noodles when I worked overtime or she was finishing her thesis. Rachel made me forget that I was walking a tightrope between two worlds, one built on bills, schedules, and caution, the other filled with aged wine and dinners with names I couldn't pronounce. But there was one thing Rachel couldn't hide forever: the way her parents looked at me. I first met them at a Sunday dinner at their expansive house on Capitol Hill. Her father, Mr. Thomas Whitmore, shook my hand with a surprisingly soft grip, not out of weakness, but because his gaze was doing all the work. Throughout the meal, he delivered questions that sounded polite but were laced with blades. "Isaac, do you see yourself staying in Utah long, or, with that salary, I bet you're great at budgeting, huh?" Her mother, Linda, just smiled and used words like serious and stable when referring to Rachel, as if those were qualities I could never provide. I smiled, stayed polite, pretended not to hear the digs. But when I left that gleaming house with its walnut floors and oil paintings in every room, I knew I wasn't welcome. Not because I was a bad person, just because I didn't belong in their world. Rachel squeezed my hand tight as we walked to the car, like she could feel it too. "Don't let them make you feel small," she said. "They just need time to understand you." But there was something in her eyes, uncertainty she didn't voice, and I wasn't naive enough to ignore it. Time could be a friend, or a traitor. That night, Thomas called me into his private study after dinner. Everything in the room, from the antique clock to the steaming cup of tea, radiated cold control. Rachel had gone off with her mom, leaving me alone with him. The oak door clicked shut behind me, and the space suddenly felt suffocating. He placed a thick folder on the desk, opened to the first page, and slid it toward me. "This is the prenuptial agreement," he said, voice flat. "Just a formality, nothing personal." I didn't touch the papers. "You're saying I'm a threat to Rachel?" He leaned back, fingers interlaced. "I'm saying every man, no matter how much he loves, can change when money enters the picture. Rachel was raised differently. I'm doing what any father would." I paused. Did Rachel know about this? He didn't answer immediately, just stared at me, dissecting me with his eyes. She agreed, but to be clear, she didn't participate in the details. I handled everything. It felt like being doused in ice water. Rachel and I had talked about our future, children, hard times we might face. But when it came to the most practical test of trust, she let someone else decide for her. I flipped through the file. The language was as cold as a corporate merger. It stated that if we divorced, I would walk away with only what I'd earned. None of her family's wealth, none of the assets she might inherit, not even a shared home unless I paid into it directly, and even then, I'd only get my original contribution back, not a penny more. Every asset, every future holding was itemized like products in an inventory list. I wasn't greedy, but signing a document like that before marrying the woman I loved made me feel less like a partner and more like a financial liability. The next day I took the contract home. I didn't sleep. I just kept asking myself one question on a loop. If Rachel truly trusted me, why didn't she say anything? I called her the following morning and asked to meet at the little cafe near Sugar House, the one where we took our first snowy walk. Rachel showed up early, holding her mocha like it was her last source of warmth that October. I placed the contract on the table. She wasn't surprised. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She looked away. "I thought you'd understand. My parents don't trust easily. This is just their way of protecting themselves. It's not because they hate you." "Not hating me," I repeated, voice low, but clearly not trusting me. "And you?" "Eh, didn't stand up." She placed her hand gently on the table. "Isaac, if that agreement hurt you, I'm sorry, but it doesn't change how I feel. I love you." I sat in silence. Those words, no matter how sincere, couldn't erase the isolation growing inside me. On one side was the woman I loved. On the other, her entire belief system, built on shielding herself from me. "Would you stand with me?" I asked. "Not against your parents, but for us, when something challenges what's fair between two people?" Rachel hesitated. Just a flicker, but enough. "I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't want to disappoint them." That wasn't a clear answer, but it was answer enough. I nodded, collected the documents. "I'll sign." Rachel blinked. "You will?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my chest. If they need this to sleep at night, let them have it. But I'll find my own way to feel safe. She looked like she wanted to respond, but said nothing. I returned to my apartment, flipped on the light, stared at the quiet room. A single document may not destroy love, but it lays bare the limits of trust. And once you see those limits, something inside never quite goes back to the way it was. We got married on a crisp autumn morning. No fireworks, no VIP guests. Just a few close friends and our families in a small wooden chapel on a Park City hillside. Rachel wore a lace dress and beamed like there was nothing in the world to fear. I smiled too, though my chest felt as cold as the first snow. That contract sat in her father's safe. Notarized, signed, complete in every way except fairness. We moved into a one-bedroom apartment in the Sugar House area, where the sound of the streetcar rang out every early morning and neighbors greeted each other with coffee in hand. Rachel started teaching at a public high school, while I kept working as a software engineer. Long hours, constant deadlines hanging over me like blades. We planned every expense carefully. We ate dinner at home, bought secondhand furniture online, and saved every receipt. Life wasn't lavish, but it wasn't miserable either. On nights when Rachel rested her head on my arm, telling me stories about a disruptive student or a coworker hogging the mic during meetings, I forgot the tangled lines of code I'd been staring at for 8 straight hours. Only when Rachel's family showed up did the air shift. They often visited on weekends, bringing baked goods and compliments wrapped in velvet. Her mom, Linda, would stroll around the apartment with a bright smile, then toss out a casual remark. "This kitchen must be perfect for heating canned soup, huh?" Her dad, Thomas, would sit on the sofa I bought secondhand, pull out a handkerchief to dust off the armrest, then nod. "As long as you two feel comfortable, that's what matters." Rachel just smiled it off like none of it could. One afternoon, as I was sorting work documents to prep for a new project submission, Thomas walked into the kitchen with a glass of red wine, looked at me and asked, "Isaac, have you thought about switching jobs lately? I heard Envia's hiring skilled engineers. Bet they pay a lot better." "I've heard of it, but that position requires constant travel. I want to stay grounded here with Rachel." He smiled and sipped his wine. "Right, you chose stability. Not everyone's willing to take risks." I didn't reply. I knew he wasn't asking out of concern. He was reminding me of something. Every sentence, every word, like a quiet jab to the ribs. Subtle, but sharp. Once, at a birthday party for one of Rachel's friends, I stepped out to the balcony to take a call and overheard laughter behind me. Linda was chatting with two older ladies. "Oh yes, he signed it. I told him it was just paperwork. But thank God, if he ever crashes and burns, at least Rachel keeps the house." I stood there in silence. No anger, just numb. Rachel knew they said things like that, but always tried to smooth it over. "They don't mean anything by it," she'd say. "My parents just aren't great with words." I used to believe that until their awkwardness repeated itself too consistently, too conveniently, and too precisely to be accidental. I threw myself into work, picked up certifications, took on freelance projects, even pulled all-nighters to complete a new security platform for a startup in Arizona. Not to impress them, just to prove to myself that I didn't need their approval to have worth. Rachel stayed supportive. She made breakfast, folded laundry, checked in on me when I looked worn out, but her silence around her parents was like a mirror, reflecting a growing gap between us. One night I asked her, "I lost my job tomorrow. If the money stopped, do you think your parents would still let me walk through their door?" Rachel froze, then looked at me, eyes glassy. "I don't know." That answer kept me awake for a week. When someone loves you yet lets others belittle you in front of them without a word, that silence isn't passive, it's permission. I started to see that something in the small home we'd built was fracturing. Not from lack of money, but from a deeper absence. The courage to stand beside each other. By the end of the year I turned 30, I felt stuck. My job at the software firm was steady like clockwork, but that same steadiness had turned everything dull. Each day felt like a faded copy of the one before. I earned enough to live, but not enough to walk into Thomas's house with my head high. One late night, after Rachel had fallen asleep, I stumbled across a forum post about a group of young founders looking for a back-end engineer to build an AI-integrated payment platform. Their budget was low, but they offered equity. I reread their message over and over. "We need someone who thinks beyond a monthly paycheck." I reached out. The first video call lasted over 2 hours. They were passionate, blunt, ambitious. No contracts, just a verbal agreement and an email confirming my 3% equity. A few weeks later, I was officially working full-time by day, freelancing by night. Morning meetings with the Utah team, evenings deep in code for a Seattle startup. Rachel started noticing I wasn't around in the living room, missed family dinners. Her "wanna watch a movie" slowly became, "You're back with that laptop again." I tried explaining, but every word collapsed under one question. What are you trying to prove? I didn't have an answer. Maybe it was about claiming my own value. Maybe it was to silence Thomas every time he said stability. The project took off faster than I expected. 1 month, then 2, then half a year, the platform was nearly complete. A major finance group from Chicago reached out with an acquisition offer. I couldn't believe the number. Had to open the spreadsheet 3 times to make sure I wasn't misreading the zeros. The deal closed just weeks later. After taxes, I had enough to wipe out my student loans, pay off the apartment, and still be left with a sum that made my breath catch. I didn't scream, didn't jump, didn't toast champagne like in the movies. I just sat at my desk, hands trembling slightly. The next morning, I booked 2 plane tickets to Maui without telling Rachel. When she walked into the room, still in her pajamas, I held them up. "Did you get time off for 3 days?" I asked. She frowned. "What's this?" "Come with me. You deserve to know where I've been for the last 6 months." Maui was a dream. Clear ocean so bright you could see the bottom, the breeze through the palm trees whispering peace. We stayed at a beachfront resort, the kind of place we used to only see in magazines. Rachel hugged me from behind while we watched the sunset. For the first time in months, she seemed to soften. "I didn't think you could actually do it," she said, part awe, part pride, and part unease. I smiled. "I told you I would." Back in Utah, I submitted my resignation. My boss was stunned. "You were being considered for management, Isaac." "Not every promotion is progress," I replied. I used most of the remaining money to start a real estate company that bought old buildings, renovated them, and leased them out. Not because I loved real estate, Because I needed something solid, something that stood on its own, needing no one's permission. Rachel watched my journey with mixed eyes. Pride, but also hesitance. She began to show me off to her friends, posting photos of me at job sites, wearing a reflective vest, blueprint in hand. But whenever her family showed up, everything reverted to script. One night over dinner at a high-end restaurant, Thomas's treat, he raised his glass of red wine and looked at me, brow lifted. Looks like that prenup wasn't so necessary after all, huh, Isaac? That seemingly harmless comment made my spoon freeze midair. Rachel glanced at me, gauging my reaction. I smiled and set the spoon down. No, it's actually the best thing you ever did. All eyes turned to me, but I didn't elaborate. Only those who've been underestimated, scrutinized, labeled a financial risk, truly understand the value of a document they once despised. As for me, I turned it into a fortress, protecting everything I built with sweat and patience. 6 months after the equity buyout deal, my phone started ringing more often. Not from partners or tenants, but from Thomas. What began as polite small talk slowly turned into sugar-coated favors. Isaac, he said one Monday afternoon, I'm thinking about buying up that old lot on West 9th Street in Salt Lake. There's an abandoned commercial strip there. Could have potential. If you're interested, I think we could partner up. I switched the phone to speaker as I flipped through my project notes. You mean financial partnership? Yes. I bring the experience, you bring the capital, we split the profits. I looked at the note on the page. 9th Street site, weak soil foundation, inflated price from last year. Well, I'll review the details and get back to you. He gave a small all right, but I could hear the letdown. He had never brought up money with me before. Now, every conversation ended with a soft pitch. The following week, I had dinner at their house at Rachel's invitation. Linda greeted me with an unusually warm smile, her hands still flashing with gemstone rings. You've lost weight, Isaac. Running a business and never resting, huh? I nodded. A lot going on. She poured another glass of wine inside, eyes drifting to the candle in the center of the table. Prices are climbing like crazy. My entire shop chain's been hit, and your father-in-law's not as energetic as he used to be. Thank goodness you and Rachel are stable now. I raised my glass and just smiled. She didn't say it directly, but every carefully chosen word felt like a path laid out for a pending request. During dinner, Thomas brought up the land again, this time with a printed zoning map and a projected profit chart. I skimmed it, then set it down. Think that location's risky. Low population density, and it's close to the old waste treatment plant. Thomas frowned. You work in real estate. Why let feelings get in the way? You need to see the potential, not just the problems. I stayed direct. Potential doesn't appear from nowhere. It needs a solid foundation. I invest based on data, not relationships. The mood dropped. Rachel shot me a look, then rushed to change the subject. That night, driving home, she shut the car door harder than usual. Why'd you talk to my dad like that? He was just trying to include you. I didn't shut him down, but I won't blindly say yes either. You know I don't like being manipulated, especially through family ties. She stayed quiet, her gaze dimmed. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but the truth was too plain. Her family had smelled the money and now wanted a piece. A few weeks later, Linda emailed Rachel. It seemed like a casual check-in, but at the bottom was a link to a crowdfunding campaign for a handcrafted premium bakery for niche markets. Below that, a note, if Isaac's interested in a small investment, that'd be wonderful. Rachel forwarded me the email saying nothing. I didn't reply either. One afternoon, while inspecting a property project on the south side of town, my phone rang. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated a few seconds, then picked up. Isaac, quick question. Are you sitting on much liquid cash? I heard there's an office building in West Jordan going up for sale fast. I exhaled, watching the crane lift a steel beam. Let me be clear. If you want advice, I'm happy to help. But if this is about putting in money, we should draw a clear line. I don't invest emotionally, especially not out of obligation. The line went silent, then a forced chuckle. Understood. That night, Rachel didn't come home. She texted to say she was staying at her mother's place. something to talk about. I didn't respond. The next morning, I opened my inbox and saw a message from Thomas. Isaac, I hope you don't think our family is taking advantage of you. We just want to grow together. I didn't reply. What they wanted to grow wasn't kinship, it was access to my wallet. And I started to wonder, had I married Rachel, or had I married into a hunger veiled in family titles? That night's dinner took place at Thomas and Linda's estate, the same place that once made me feel like an unwelcome guest. The long dining table was still covered in white French-stitched cloth, the chandelier casting a heavy formality over everything. Sarah sat between me and her mother, smiling lightly whenever someone mentioned my latest project or recent investments. As the main course was served, Thomas set down his utensils, folded his arms, and tilted his head to look at me over his wineglass. Isaac, don't you think by now we've truly become family? I nodded cautiously. Yes, I think we've been close for a while. He glanced at Linda, then fixed his gaze back on me. Well then, I think it's time we let go of that prenuptial agreement. It doesn't mean anything anymore, right? I set my fork down. What rose in my chest wasn't anger or surprise, but cold awareness. Linda chimed in, voice as steady as if she were giving baking tips. You've built a solid foundation together. You're not that fresh out of school guy anymore. That document only creates confusion, makes people think this marriage had conditions. I turned to Sarah, expecting her to speak up, or at least put her hand on mine like she used to when she saw me under pressure. But she stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the melting ice in her glass. I said calmly, everything's fine the way it is. It's never been an issue between us. There's no reason to change it. Thomas let out a dry chuckle. It's not about issues, it's about sentiment. That contract assumes divorce. It plants doubt between people who are supposed to love each other. Neither party, I said nothing. The rest of dinner passed in silence. No one touched dessert. Driving home, I couldn't hold back. What do you think about all that? Sarah sighed, twisting her wedding ring. They just want to make sure you're not still guarding yourself from me. Guarding? I looked at her, bitterness seeping in. They're the ones who made me sign it, and now, because I've made money, they want to tear it up? She didn't respond immediately. We passed a long stretch of yellow lights before she finally said, If you trust me, do we still need that paper? I gave a dry laugh. Good question, but it works both ways. If you trust me, then keeping it shouldn't hurt anyone. In the days that followed, tension quietly built up. Sarah started bringing it up more often, during dinner, while making the bed, even in the middle of me reviewing basement plans for a hotel project in Provo. That contract makes me feel like I'm in a limited marriage. It's like I always have to prove I'm not after something. I set my laptop down and stared at her. Limited? I built everything from scratch, step by step. I don't need you to prove anything. But I won't destroy the only thing that protects a lifetime of work, just to satisfy some idea of trust you couldn't offer me from the beginning. She turned away, clutching a blanket as she walked out of the living room like I'd just said something cruel. I didn't follow her, because if someone insists you tear down your walls just so they can feel safe, they're not seeking trust, they're seeking control. 3 days later, I came home earlier than expected after a meeting got canceled. Sarah was talking to her mother on FaceTime. Their voices dropped when I entered, but I still caught a few lines. I told you, he's stubborn. You just need to be a little more patient, and everything will go according to plan. I didn't say a word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I walked straight into my office, opened the safe, pulled out the prenuptial agreement, and sat down at the desk. I wasn't angry anymore, just coldly aware, like someone quietly approaching a fork in the road that offers no return. Something in this marriage had derailed, not because of money, but because when it was time to speak up, she chose silence. That night, Rachel hurled the question at me like a stone into still water. How long are you going to keep that damn contract? Until we have kids? I looked up from my desk, eyes burning from staring at reports since morning. I'm not keeping it because I don't trust you. I'm keeping it for a reason. A reason? Her voice spiked. What reason? Besides you not trusting me? You think I married you for money? I didn't respond right away, because if I said what was circling in my head, there'd be no going back. But Rachel didn't wait. She kept pressing like she was cross-examining me in court. Or are you just holding on to it so you can walk away clean if this all falls apart? Don't push this all on me, I said, trying to keep calm. If someone's trying to tear up the very agreement their own family insisted on, maybe ask what made them change their minds so suddenly. Rachel went quiet, then turned and left without another word. The bedroom door slammed shut behind her. The next morning, I booked a cabin in Aspen, a small wooden place tucked in the woods. No cell signal, just mountains and snow. I left a note on the kitchen counter. We need to talk, somewhere far from everyone getting in the way. She agreed to go. She didn't talk much on the drive, just stared out the window. When we arrived, she got out first, dragging her suitcase across the icy ground. That first night, I made spaghetti. She ate silently, picking at her plate like she was counting the minutes. Later, as we sat by the fireplace, I asked the question, do you still want to be in this marriage? She raised an eyebrow. Why would you ask that? Because you're using a contract to measure love, and I'm watching love being used to pressure someone into destroying a contract. Rachel set down her wine glass and sighed. You always think you're right. Everything you do has logic and principle, and I'm just the weak one being manipulated by her parents. I looked straight at her. You're not weak. You choose silence because you don't want to lose anything. But you forgot. When you won't protect the person you love, you let them take all the hits alone. What now? Her voice was soft but sharp. If we can't trust each other enough to tear up a piece of paper, what's left? So you talking about divorce? I asked, eyes fixed on her. She didn't answer, just stood up and stepped onto the balcony, snow slicing through the air. 2 days later, when we returned to the city, I walked into the house a few minutes ahead of her. The living room lights were on. There was soft laughter. She had invited her family over without telling me. Thomas stood from the couch like he'd been waiting. Linda sat beside him, lips pressed tight. Sarah entered behind me and quietly closed the door. Isaac, Thomas began, we need to settle this once and for all. I removed my scarf, set my wallet on the table. Settle what, sir? It's that contract, it's hurting this family. I sat across from him, slowly. That contract came from you, back when all I had was an old laptop and belief in a future. Now that I have something worth protecting, it's suddenly a problem? Linda cut in, voice calm like she was sharing a recipe. We just want to see real trust between you two. Nothing should be defined by legal papers. I turned to Sarah. Did you invite them? She gave a small nod. I want us all to fix this together, instead of staying divided. Thomas placed his hands on the table. Isaac, if you're not willing to get rid of it, we won't force you. But my daughter shouldn't live in a marriage built on suspicion. I stood up. If you think keeping a promise is suspicion, then maybe your definition of family needs revising. No one said a word as I went into the other room and retrieved the document from the safe. I brought it out and placed it on the table. This is the contract, and no one has the right to force me to rip it up because they feel hurt. Everything in here stands for fairness, not limitation. Thomas stared at me, his eyes seeming to darken. Well then, he said slowly, don't blame us if my daughter starts reconsidering what she really wants. I didn't answer. I looked at Rachel, waiting for her to stand up for me, the way I had once stood for her. But she stayed silent, head down, hands clasped. I understood. Some answers don't need to be spoken. Some battles don't begin with a shot, but with silence. And they end the same way. The text came on a Thursday morning, just one line. I need to see you. Urgently. Somewhere no one knows. The sender was Amy, Rachel's youngest sister, the quiet one. She rarely got involved in family matters, usually sitting quietly in a corner during gatherings, nodding when spoken to. For her to reach out like this, at such a tense moment, meant something was wrong. I picked a small coffee shop near the university where Amy worked as a teaching assistant. She was already there, tucked into a corner booth, hands wrapped around a cup of cocoa, eyes flicking toward the window like she was afraid someone might follow her. I sat down. Before I could speak, Amy looked up. They're lying to you, Isaac. I froze. Who? My parents. Rachel, that whole let's be a united family story. It's just a front. They've been planning to push you to cancel the prenup. And then Amy clenched her hands. Then Rachel's going to file for divorce. I leaned back in my seat, unable to speak. I heard them talking about it over dinner 2 weeks ago. I came home early to grab a book from the living room and caught them discussing how to clear the path for Rachel to legally walk away. Dad said if the prenup stays, she won't get anything. I stayed silent, head spinning. Amy looked directly at me, her gaze steady for the first time. They also said Rachel's seeing someone else. His name's Tyler. They met through her yoga group. They called him the backup plan. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles cracked. Amy lowered her head, her voice softer. I couldn't let you keep walking this path without knowing. I feel guilty for staying silent this long. I nodded, swallowing the burning lump in my chest. You're sure? I asked. Amy nodded. I heard it myself. They plan to pressure you until you give up and tear up the contract. That way in the divorce, everything gets split. My mom said straight up, if we don't do this, the girl's walking out with an empty suitcase. That sentence echoed in my head like a church bell in a snowstorm. I left the cafe not even sure if I said goodbye to Amy. I couldn't focus on anything the rest of the afternoon. Every line from that intervention replayed in my head, only now their real intent was clear. It wasn't worry. It wasn't about unity. It was strategy. Later that day, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint account. I scanned recent transactions. 2 upscale restaurant charges I'd never been to, a hotel bill in Park City on a weekday, a jewelry purchase for a significant amount. Rachel had been using her personal card, but sometimes she swiped the joint one by mistake, a small slip, but enough to rip off the mask. I didn't confront her that night. We still had dinner together, exchanged small talk. I watched her smile, watched her place vegetables on my plate, and imagined that hand on someone else's shoulder. After she went to shower, I cleared the dishes and headed into my office. I called my lawyer. I need to start collecting evidence, I said. On the other end, the lawyer sighed. You've got enough grounds to hold the current terms. Don't let emotion make you retreat. Stay calm. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, one hand covering my face. Amy had chosen to stand with me, even though she was the only one in that family who still had a shred of conscience. But there was something I hadn't told anyone, not even Amy. I had quietly amended the prenup 2 years ago, after my company started generating real profit. I didn't change the asset division clause. I only added one line. In the event of proven infidelity by one party, the other has the right to dissolve the agreement without sharing any assets acquired after marriage. Rachel didn't know. Her family didn't know. They thought they were playing chess, but they forgot. I was no longer the man who got pushed into signing that paper. I had learned how to protect myself, silently. 1 week after meeting Amy, I submitted all the evidence to my attorney. Bank statements, hotel receipts, GPS location history from Rachel's phone, and Amy's testimony, notarized by a third party. Everything was methodical, complete, airtight. I didn't do it out of rage. I did it because I needed to end this with a clarity they never expected. The divorce papers were filed Monday morning. My attorney served them to Rachel around noon at school. I wasn't there. I left a handwritten note in our mailbox, short and final. No anger, just the last line. Trust was the only thing I kept, and you put it on a scale. She didn't come home that night. I assumed she was at her parents', the place where every scheme had been whispered behind my back. It took almost 4 days before she called. Her voice was rough, like she'd been crying while trying to stay composed. You're really going through with this? I answered with one word, absolutely. Silence stretched before she hung up, no more words. A few days later, her lawyer responded. They tried to negotiate a division of assets. I declined. I sent back a copy of the amended prenup with the added clause she never knew about. Certified, signed, sealed. Infidelity, breach of trust. No entitlement to any post-marriage assets. Their whole plan crumbled. Sarah stayed silent through the proceedings, no objections to the evidence, no appearance at mediation. At the final hearing, her lawyer kept repeating, "My client is experiencing psychological distress. The court was unmoved. The divorce was granted. No asset rights, no financial support. Total vacuum. 2 weeks later, I heard Tyler, Rachel's so-called boyfriend, had disappeared without a trace. No texts, no calls, no goodbye. Someone spotted him at a party in Scottsdale with another woman on his arm, like none of it ever happened. That's when Rachel started trying to come back. She texted, emailed, even left handwritten notes at my office. Apologies, claims of losing control, of being led astray, of wanting to fix things. One afternoon, as I stepped out of the office, she was standing there, eyes hollow, hair a mess, wearing the old coat she'd left in my garage. "I have nothing left, Isaac," she said, her voice barely holding. "My mom, drowning in debt. My dad had to close 3 dealerships. Tyler's vanished. I messed up." I looked at her, not with hatred, just the quiet of someone with no emotion left to spare. "I'm not holding anything of yours," I said, "just the lessons from everything that happened." She stepped closer, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I need you." I didn't look away, but my words locked the final door. "No. You need someone to fill the emptiness you created. I'm not that person anymore." Rachel stood there, lips trembling. I walked past her without turning back. The fallout spread fast in the local business circle. Her father sold off 2 of the 3 dealerships. The last one was about to be seized by the bank. Her mother was accused of misusing client investment funds for personal expenses. They faded quietly from the social scene. No more galas, no more headlines. Amy texted me one morning midweek, just one line: "Thank you for not letting them bury you like they did others." I sat in my office, looking out at the construction site, a 3-story building near completion, soon to house our new company headquarters. The crew was painting the logo. Next to it was a plaque with the motto I chose after it all: "Your worth isn't in how you begin, it's in how well you protect yourself." Isaac walked through a marriage that once looked perfect, only to discover the rot of manipulation and betrayal beneath the surface. He didn't retaliate with anger, but with clarity and boundaries. By holding his line, he preserved everything he had built and learned this truth: trust isn't something you trade for family ties, and love never needs coercion to prove itself. Clear-minded resolve is the strongest armor in any relationship. What do you think about Isaac's decision and the way he handled betrayal? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and unexpected real-life family stories.